Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Layer Cake, starring Daniel Craig, Cole Meany, I don't know if I said that right, please forgive me, Michael Gambon, Kenneth Cranham, Jason Fleming, Dexter Fletcher, Jamie Foreman, and Sienna Miller, directed by Matthew Vaughn. Now, Matthew Vaughn, I've reviewed most of this guy's oeuvre from Kick-Ass to X-Men to the Kingsman films, so I'm gonna do his, and including Stardust for Christ's sakes, as I'm gonna lead this movie up. This is the only one that I haven't seen yet of his oeuvre, and I'm gonna and reviewed for that matter, as I'm leading up to those films that I reviewed before, as well as this movie going all the way to Argyle coming out in February, which the trailer kind of scares me because I hate the part where they abuse the cat like crazy. But let's start off with this movie. Let's get into it. We open with XXXX, played by Daniel Craig, who I'm going to call X for the rest of the movie because those three extra X's is too hard for me as a monster getting some kind of medicine at a pharmacy. As he says, he's not a gangster. He's a businessman, or I should say, monologue. He monologues about that as it could lead to millions of things. And he's been in prison before while he monologues about his job, which is the definition of a gangster. And I like the way this movie is shot, as this is director Matthew Vaughn's first movie as a director, as he does things quite well for a movie about gangsters. And I like Daniel Craig as the protagonist in this movie. And this is how he ended up getting hired for James Bond in Casino Royale and on until No Time to Die. X has a meeting with his boss, Jimmy Price, as there's times I had a hard time understanding what they're saying because of their accents being so thick. No offense to those people that have those kind of accents. But I don't mind it too much in other movies, but I have to be fair because Matthew Vaughn is from England himself, but he is usually very good at camera movements in his action movies, as this is more of a thriller. And I feel the thrills from start to finish. He gets hired to find Jimmy's daughter named Charlie, and he reluctantly agrees as that's not what he does, but he accepts anyways as he deals with the Duke and his partner Slasher, played by Sally Hawkins, as they do go over the top with their performances, as every single scene they're in, they're angry. And it gets obnoxious after a while. X has a word with a couple of mobsters to help find Charlie, as Duke's nephew Sidney, played by Ben Whishaw, comes up to X with Tammy, played by Sienna Miller, and he stares at her like she's attractive while talking to Sidney and having a champagne with him. And I do like these scenes at the club, and it's nice to see Ben Whishaw before he was Q in Skyfall, and the voice of Paddington, and those are the films I know him from. As the cinematography is pretty good in this movie, Duke arms the gangsters, some gangsters I'll say, while Slasher holds the gun and she's shaking and accidentally shoots the plant man when he enters, and he's working at that factory, and they're fucked because Duke is coming for all their heads, and that scene gave me the chills. X goes inside an interrogation room to interrogate a couple of morons about where Charlie is at, and learns she's gone while Morty walks out, as does X, and makes a call about homicide while Morty and X meets with Freddy at a restaurant to only beat the shit out of him and pours tea on Freddy, which is a violent scene, but it's directed well as the writing works for me as a British thriller. We learn Morty was in prison because of Freddy falling asleep on the job, and X is learning about it now, which is a dumb reason to begin with, sure, and that could be in the editing room floor, in my opinion. Gene gives X a gun, despite we learn earlier in the film he hates guns, but he holds a gun to defend himself, and the next day, X gets a call from someone named Dragon, while Gaza is being a crybaby about something, and again, I couldn't understand it, and I wish I put on subtitles for my second viewing, which I didn't, to be fair, but it was too late while I'm 45 minutes into the movie. I didn't want to start it all over again at this point, and he calls Tammy and hooks up with her until he gets kidnapped, and the Rolling Stones play in the background, which is a good piece of music, as well as it's a good song, while Sydney calls her like crazy, And these are great to watch until X gets kidnapped, which makes me think he's fucked for now, until the end of the movie. X almost gets thrown off a building while Jimmy's old colleague named Eddie Temple, played by Michael Gambon, who after Richard Harris died played Dumbledore in the Harry Potter films, who has a chat with X about his business with X to get his money of 30 million pounds back. And by pounds, I mean dollars. That's what they call it in England. And has a chat with Jimmy, and he hears their plan to kill off X. And that scene was good to look at, as most of the scenes are, as this is a good looking movie, in my opinion. X goes to Jimmy's house to point a gun at him and kills him off while watering his plants, and throws the gun in the water and burns the evidence of Jimmy's death, and struggles with sleeping and grabs money and passports while he gets a call following where Sydney went. And the movie begins to sour on me at this point, but I'm still liking it at this point. X gets a call from Dragon, and X asks him to meet him at a park and asks someone to watch him day and night, and chats with Eddie about the pills and gives X 3 million pounds to settle with a debt from Jimmy himself while he's spied on with Morty. And I'm starting to have a little bit of problems with the movie at this point, just minor problems at best. Gene beats up on X for killing Jimmy off, and Morty asks him why did he do it, who says because Jimmy is not the father of Charlie, as X shows from them the audio proving Jimmy is guilty for killing Jerry, which did feel a little convenient. X gets promoted to being the boss and goes after Dragon, but his sniper that ends up getting killed by Dragon himself and gets chewed out by Gene and Morty, and X finally learns about Duke and Slasher's death as Gene had them killed, which was badly timed, sure. X called Tommy, and Sydney answers it. Tammy. And Sydney answers it and says fuck off and joins Sydney on a ride to Gazo while Dragon watches him go there, and the police come busting in and they get away on a runaway boat, which felt like a good chase sequence in my opinion. X returns the pills to the owner and takes them to Eddie, and X has a chat with Eddie and tells him welcome to the layer cake, which I guess is the point of the title, and takes the pills back and lies low with Tammy at a park club, and he gets out of the gangster business until he gets shot by Sydney as he slowly dies, and credits roll as the climax made the movie interesting at first, as an interesting first feature film from director Matthew Vaughn. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 6.9 out of 10. This movie gave me chills from start to finish, as this is a good first film from director Matthew Vaughn, but at the same time it was hard for me to understand what they're saying with their thick accents. And the cinematography looks pretty damn good, as I like the way it was shot. It's directed well, as the writing works for me as a British thriller, but at the same time it was violent, but I like the movie for what it is. And it was good to look at some points in the movie, as this is a good looking movie with style that Matthew Vaughn will have in later films that I reviewed before this in his new movie. And I like the actors in their role, but the characters come off likable. But and at the end of the day, this is a good movie with and a recommendable time, as this is Matthew Vaughn's first movie, and it's a good one. So I'm giving this movie a recommendation, and also turn on the subtitles because, like I said, it was hard to understand what they were saying with their thick accents, but I still like the movie at the end of the day. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be back in a month and a half with Argyle, beginning of February. And because I've reviewed X-Men, Stardust, Kick-Ass, and Kingsman, and all that. So I'm all set to lead up to Argyle. And until then, put it back, Eggsy.